I can see the importance of being empathetic with your mentees and focus on their needs. But Katie, some mentors got cold feet when they heard their youth have been through trauma. They were not sure how to react when mentee shared so-called heavy stuff with them. They were worried that because they're from backgrounds and lived experiences very different from their mentees, and they may not be comfortable to make themselves relatable to their mentees. What kind of advice would you like to give to these mentors?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you can always ask for help. And mentoring programs are there specifically to provide support and guidance and resources in these situations where you feel a little bit out of your depths. I think another piece, not to sound crass, but research. If you don't have any experience with things like racism in your own life, learning more about how like racism functions and plays out in Canada, because it does. If your mentee comes from a low-income family, a cash-poor family, maybe they're first-generation Canadian, maybe they're living in social housing or dealing with, injustice in their education system, whatever applies to their lives. There's, learning more about that, both from speaking with them and doing your own research, I think is really valuable. So there was a document that came out in 2008 called Review of Youth Violence Report that does a really great job in outlining the individual and social factors that can lead to violence in the community. So I really think looking at that document and learning more about those would definitely help, and the link will be below. It's also really important to remember, though, that these things can be strengths too, right? And like the neighborhood that your young person comes from might have a bad reputation because of the media, but there might be amazing things that happen there that really give them a lot of strength. So rather than coming from a deficit model, really taking a strengths-based approach and celebrating what makes them unique and awesome. And if you Google strengths-based approach, there's tons of stuff there.
I like how you put it. Sometimes adversive experience does become asset of our life.
There's great stuff out there about how trauma impacts us, like we were speaking about earlier. And I think it's a good idea for mentors to do some research on those topics as well. There's also great stuff on self-regulation, mindfulness, and other stress management strategies that can help us sort of identify when we're experiencing stress and give us strategies to manage and reduce it.
But do you think this is the responsibility of the mentors to seek out all this information?
I think really ideally, I would love to see mentoring programs including these elements in their training. And I recognize that this can be challenging for a variety of reasons, the least of which is time. But I think that if we really want to set mentors up for success, we need to give them the tools and the lenses to really understand the context of their mentees' lives. So I do think that if mentors aren't receiving this training from their mentoring programs, then yes, it would be very good for them to seek it out on their own so that they can be the best mentors possible.
Katie, you just mentioned stress management. Does that only apply to people who have been through trauma, or you would suggest the mentors also practice it?
Well, I want to recognize that many of the volunteer mentors may have gone through their own traumatic experiences in their lives, but even those who haven't, adult life can be very stressful. So I do think that having stress management tools can be helpful for everybody. The other piece is that there's something called vicarious trauma, which is when we hear about someone else's difficult stories and we actually somatically experience them as our own. So we may see changes in our mood, experience anxiety or depression, changes in our eating or sleeping patterns as though it happened to us, even though we know that it didn't. So I think it's important to also be aware of that, paying attention. And I think by being able to have tools and strategies to be aware of our stress levels and then also to do something about them and manage them is an important part in being the best mentor that we can be.
So in this course, most of our participants are prospective mentors for vulnerable youth. It's important for them to know practicing self-care is essential to the mentee-centered approach. But what if someone watching this interview is now thinking, I have too much stress on my own, and I've been going through too much hardship to be able to be a good mentor? What would you say to him or her?
Um, I think that the most important thing is making a commitment to showing up and being present for your mentee. But if somebody is feeling like maybe they can't make the commitment or their stress levels are too high, I think it's important to be curious about that and really lean into it. Um, there's an expression that I really like, and it's that you cannot pour from an empty cup. So, really checking in with yourself about kind of how full your cup is or isn't, and then making choices based on that. Um, I think that the instinct to kind of like help and contribute positively is really beautiful, but it's important that that not be, at the expense of your health or your well-being.
So putting yourself first is what you mean about self-care.
Yeah, I think it's really about paying attention to where you're at, how you're feeling, and what your body's telling you, and then really using that as your guide on how to proceed. Um, and making time as much as you can, because I know how busy things can get, for the things that make us feel good, that help you stay on top of things, help you relax and restore, whatever that means for you.
Katie, today's interview is an eye-opener for me. Thank you so much for spending time with us on this very important topic. I've learned a lot from you. I'm pretty sure the audience in front of the computer have learned a lot too. Thank you so much for all these input and insights. Uh, I wish you best of luck with your life-changing work and hope to see you soon. Thank you.